Merry Christmas, everybody! Did you know that Christmas is an act of cultural appropriation? This video's 5 days late. I think maybe a few years ago, 10-ish years ago, there was probably a Tumblr post going around about how Christmas is basically a festival that the Christians appropriated from pagan traditions in the local areas or something like that in order to make Christianity more popular, which sounds like something that could happen. And I kind of filed that in my brain under oh yeah, that's a funny thing I heard from Tumblr that one time. And I was trying to think about what a funny seasonal topical video I could do for Christmas would be. And I remembered that post and I decided, oh, that'll be fun. I'll read the Wikipedia page for Christmas to confirm whether or not that's true, and then I'll make a video about my findings. That sounds like a fun, easy project. No, it's not a fun, easy project. I should have known better because I've done history studies before. It turns out that history is always way, way more complicated than anything else you could ever imagine. So I did find some stuff to justify the title of this video. It's not going to be as damning as maybe it sounds on paper, but maybe you'll find it interesting anyway. So if you want to learn more about Christmas and listen to me talk about a Wikipedia binge that I went on a few days ago, stick around for more, I guess. Part 1. When is Christmas? Christmas, generally speaking, falls on December 25th every year. It's not one of those rotating holidays like Thanksgiving where you have to do a calculation about which day of the week it is. It's just December 25th. But why is it December 25th, you may ask? And the answer to that question depends on who you ask. This is the Wikipedia page for Christmas. It's very long. There are possibly 4-ish theories as to how the date of Christmas originated. I'm just going to roughly say that there's 2 camps you can fall under. There's the Christian camp and there's the not Christian camp. In the Christian camp, we have 2 hypotheses. One is that you can calculate the day that Christ was born because he was conceived on March 25th, which is the Annunciation. Sure, why not? Another theory is that they just kind of picked the solstice because the solstice is, nice. It's a good day. I guess you can consider this like a split between the secular and Christian hypotheses. I got a Twitch notification. Another hypothesis is that they picked the day to coincide with the date of festivities to celebrate Sol Invictus, the sun god, which is kind of what I think I half remember from Tumblr. And then in general, there's kind of this weirdness about Christmas, which is that it happens to coincide with a lot of pagan festivities that were kind of emerging around the same time. So you can go to that Wikipedia page and read the whole thing if you want. Basically, what I'm getting at is you can be in one of 2 camps, for the most part. One is that you can try to find some kind of religious celestial justification for the date that's based on, say, other aspects of Christian texts, or it's based on things like the solstice, which have some kind of religious significance, which I think is what most Christians and the Christian churches in general will go for. Or you can take this other approach, which I think is more interesting to look at personally, which is the kind of historical circumstance around Christmas. There was kind of this surging of momentum around Sol Invictus during this time period of say the early 300s, 200s, late 200s, something like that. The thing about these small religious movements is that they kind of tend to grow and grow out of control if they get too popular. So people who are in power don't really want to see stuff like that because they know from history that the more small movements like this get momentum, the more kind of potent they can become later on. If you take all the people who are celebrating on this day and say, hey, we also have a holiday here that's kind of the same thing as what you're doing, that's a way to kind of poach people from this cult following and push them into Christianity to make it more popular. Is this actually what happened? Is this actually what the great theologians or whoever, were they actually planning on this? Was this intentional on their part? The answer is that I don't know, and I don't think we can ever know. The Christian churches in general have a very strong interest in not saying ever that they just stole the holiday from the pagans, because that would look really, really bad. That's really bad PR. I don't think we can ever really know what went on behind closed doors for whoever it was that decided on Christmas being this day. They must have known about these festivities, and that probably influenced their way of thinking. They probably think well, it would be very convenient if it did happen to be on December 25th, the same day as these other festivals. I don't think you're ever really going to see a primary source straight up say that yeah, we decided on this day for the sake of power relations, for the sake of taking power away from these other cults. So even if that was the real reason, I don't think we ever know that for sure. And so there's always going to be diehard diehard historians who say like we need to have that primary source or else we can't say that no matter what. You're also always going to have Christians and theologians who are going to say, of course, there's no way they could have done that because, you know, if you did believe that, it would kind of undermine your faith a little bit because it would really highlight like the way that religion is mostly determined by like power relations and not anything cosmic. So obviously I have a bias. If you haven't figured it out, watch that part again. The point being is that Christmas was not kind of like ordained from God and just plonked down like, okay, everyone celebrate on this day. There was history around it. There is some backstory. There is some lore. And I think I just want to highlight that there is lore, even if I don't know exactly what all of the lore is. Part 2, Santa Claus. This is Santa Claus, as portrayed by Jonathan Meath, whoever that is. Santa Claus is basically synonymous with Christmas, as I'm sure you know. He's the one who gets all the presents and brings them around to all the good little children. He's the one who kind of stalks you at night and decides whether or not you're a good person, somehow. But what does Santa actually have to do with Christianity as a figure? Have you ever actually thought about this? Because here is a church that is very conservative leaning in its ethics and its morality. It has this holiday in it that is supposed to be about like family time and bonding, but there's also like this weird materialistic kick about it where here's this guy who's going to bring you stuff and goodies for the sake of Christmas. Where did this actually come from? Who is this guy? So broadly speaking, there are kind of 3-ish, maybe 2 depending on how you count, 2 to 3 historical figures that Santa Claus is based on. The reason why it's 2 to 3 is because one of them was also based on a previous one. I'll show you in a second. The 3 you basically have are Saint Nicholas, Father Christmas, and if you click on this, Sinterklaas. And Sinterklaas is based on Saint Nick, so it's kind of like 2.5 different people, maybe. The first predecessor is this guy named Saint Nicholas. He is known for his generous gifts to the poor, especially so that people would not have to become prostitutes. So this is kind of like where the gift-giving stuff comes from with Santa Claus. And I guess there's also some connection to like the 3 gifts of the Magi. I'm not even going to get into that. Basically, there was this famous saint in the past who was really good with gifts and liked giving things to people. There's also this guy named Father Christmas. Father Christmas is a character from English folklore, and this is where we get a lot of the quote-unquote jolly stuff from. So he was like a big festival guy. Look at him. He's having a great time over there. He liked drinking. He liked partying. He's like grown-up Santa Claus. He's the party guy. He's the merrymaker. This is very different from the sort of family-friendly image of Santa Claus as the guy who takes care of all the good little boys and girls. I guess it's kind of weird in its own way. But this guy is like the Santa Claus's raunchy older brother, essentially. And then you have someone named Sinterklaas, which is, I can't pronounce it because I'm not European. This guy is also based on the same Saint Nicholas that was in the first section, but he has a funny hat and I guess you have the beard. I don't know anything about him. Listen, it's Dutch, okay? It's important that he's Dutch because that is basically why we have a Santa Claus now. Very, very long story short. Christmas in the Americas starts in New York, New York, hometown of me. I love being a New Yorker. And New York, as you may or may not know, it used to be a Dutch colony before it became an English colony. If you've ever heard New York called New Amsterdam, that's where it comes from. I hit my mic, sorry. It started out as New Amsterdam when the Dutch were here, and then the English took over, and that's when it became called New York, because there's an Amsterdam in Dutch in the Netherlands, and then there's a York in England. That's where that comes from, in case you didn't know. So, very strong Dutch presence in New York. A man by the name of Washington Irving wrote a book called The History of New York, that features Sinterklaas as a character. So when Washington Irving did this, he lost his bishop's apparel, he lost the cool hat, kept the beard, became a thick-bellied Dutch sailor with a pipe in a green winter coat, and it was supposed to be a parody of Dutch people. Santa Claus may be a racial stereotype, this just in. And he created Santa in this way specifically to make people stop Christmasing. So once upon a time, this holiday season, I mean, I guess it still is in some ways, was like, you know, a very raunchy thing. Actually very similar to what Father Christmas was back in the day. They were kind of crazy. They were kind of They were kind of crazy. And so the original Santa Claus was kind of parodying this culture of like over partying around the holiday season. Essentially, what happened is that the older Christmas Essentially, what happened is that the upper classes of New York wanted people to stop being such party heads around Christmas time, and so they reinvented the holiday to be more family friendly and to be less raunchy. And then also something about Dickens and A Christmas Carol, and he kind of also spearheaded the movement to make it more family friendly. Basically, what I'm saying is that Santa Claus was born from this like puritanical war on excessive merrymaking, and so the image of Santa Claus keeps getting like torn back and forth between like the raunchy sexual old man versus the very puritanical, like, nice guy sort of take care of the children and whatever. These two versions of Santa Claus were kind of in conflict with each other during the early 19th century, and eventually they just kind of like merged and collapsed into the Santa Claus we know today. As you can tell, I'm not really a historian. So all this to say that Santa Claus is basically a conglomeration of a saint that came from the Catholic Church, plus a traditional piece of English folklore, plus a traditional piece of Dutch folklore that was then appropriated to be a stereotype of Dutch culture. But all of those things then kind of combine to be weaponized against the lower classes in order to try to make them behave better during the holiday season. That's Santa Claus, I guess. What's the original point I was trying to make? This video has completely spiraled out of control. I'm actually reshooting the ending because I went on another like 20-minute tangent about how Christmas carols are basically class warfare. Subscribe to my Patreon if you want to see that. It's the end of this clip. But I'm just going to cut it off here because I can't take this anymore. Christmas is complicated, history is complicated, and I'm never doing a history video again unless I do a lot more research than I was able to do here. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for watching. Sorry about the clickbait title. Christmas is kind of a cultural appropriation in the sense that there are other cultures that are non-Christian that kind of got folded into the Christmas spirit, but let's be real here. I'm mostly making this video because I got obsessed with the Wikipedia binge and I need to show something for it so that it wasn't just a big waste of time. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to see more rants like this, except hopefully on things that I actually know about and that I didn't just crib from Wikipedia over the course of like a few hours on a weekday. Leave an angry comment about how I'm not a historian or how Christmas is sacred or whatever for engagement purposes. I'll see you in the next one. Have a good day.